When I bought the old piece of forested land on the outskirts of Pine Hill, I thought I was making a smart investment. It was quiet, untouched, and full of century-old oak and cedar trees. I'd planned to use it for a small woodworking business, selling premium timber to furniture makers. Everything was legal, properly documented and paid for. But my land shared a border with an HOA community, a bunch of overly entitled people who thought they ran the whole town. From the day I moved in, the HOA president, Lawson, made her presence known. She warned me, "We have standards around here. Don't bring down the neighborhood value." I laughed it off. My land wasn't even part of their HOA. A few months later, a severe storm blew through, knocking down several trees. I hired workers to clear and stack the fallen logs near the edge of my property. They were valuable, dense, oak and cedar worth at least $50,000 once processed. I planned to sell them to pay off part of my land loan, but when I returned after a business trip, the logs were gone. Every single one of them. The only thing left behind was deep tire tracks, fresh ones. My stomach dropped. I checked my trail cameras, and what I saw made my blood boil. A group of men, led by Karen herself, were using trucks and loaders, moving my logs across the property line into the HOA's maintenance yard. They even covered the security camera with tape halfway through. When I confronted her the next morning, she smirked and said, "Those logs were from our community land. You had no right to take them." I showed her the property deed, maps, and footage, but she refused to back down. In fact, the next week, I got a letter from the HOA's lawyer accusing me of stealing their lumber and demanding restitution. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a setup. They thought I'd be too small to fight back, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. I started collecting every bit of evidence, drone footage, timestamps, text messages, and even GPS logs from the machinery. If they wanted a fight, I was going to give them one. Next stop, court. The morning after I received the HOA's legal letter, I knew things were going to get ugly. The tone of it was smug, accusing me of unauthorized resource, extraction, and environmental damage to community property. They were trying to flip the script, painting me as a criminal, but I wasn't about to roll over. I called my lawyer, a sharp local attorney named Dana Brooks, who specialized in property disputes. When she read the letter, she chuckled. "They're bluffing. But if they've moved your logs without permission, that's theft. Plain and simple." We started digging. Dana sent a formal request to the HOA for their evidence. In response, they sent back grainy photos, trees lying across the property line, and a witness statement from Karen's husband claiming he saw me cutting down HOA trees. It was ridiculous. My property markers were crystal clear, even registered with the county. I decided to visit the HOA's maintenance yard to see for myself. The moment I pulled up, I saw them, my logs, stacked neatly and labeled with a fresh HOA maintenance sign. It was the same wood. My initials were carved into several ends. When I took out my phone to film, 2 HOA guards stepped forward and blocked me. "Private property," one of them barked. "This is my property," I shot back, pointing at the logs. They called the police, thinking it would intimidate me. But when the officers arrived, I calmly showed them the proof, video footage from my trail cameras, GPS-tagged photos of the same logs on my side of the line. The officers took notes but didn't seize anything, saying it was a civil matter. That was fine by me. I wasn't going to rely on small-town cops who golfed with HOA board members. I went higher. I hired a licensed surveyor to re-verify my boundaries. He marked everything down to the inch. His report confirmed what I already knew. The logs were 100% from my land. Meanwhile, the HOA doubled down. They sent a community-wide email calling me a dangerous trespasser. Some of their members even came to my driveway yelling for me to return stolen property. Karen seemed to enjoy every minute of it, grinning like she'd already won. But the arrogance of that woman would soon cost her everything. Because when Dana and I finished compiling our case file with drone photos, time-stamped video, and expert statements, it was airtight. We were ready to sue for theft, defamation, and property invasion. And when the HOA board was served those papers a week later, the smug looks vanished fast. When the lawsuit was officially filed, the entire town started buzzing. People couldn't believe someone was actually suing the Pine Hill HOA. No one had ever dared. But I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it to prove they couldn't bully or steal from the little guy and get away with it. The first hearing was packed. HOA board members sat together, whispering nervously. Karen, however, wore her signature sunglasses and that same smug smirk. She acted like the judge was going to side with her just because of who she was. My lawyer, Dana, began the case by laying out the foundation: property ownership, boundary surveys, and the value of the stolen logs. Then she dropped the bomb, the drone footage showing Karen's crew cutting through my fence, hauling away the timber and trying to tape over my camera. The courtroom went silent. Karen's attorney immediately objected, claiming the footage was tampered. The judge, unimpressed, allowed it after verifying the metadata and timestamps. Then came the testimonies. My hired workers confirmed that the logs were from my property. The surveyor testified about the clear boundary lines. Even the local lumber buyer identified my initials carved into the logs. Every statement built another brick in the wall against the HOA. When it was Karen's turn to take the stand, she tried her usual charm. She claimed I had donated the logs as a community goodwill gesture and was now harassing them for money. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Do you have any documentation of that?" he asked. Karen hesitated. "Well, it was verbal," she said weakly. Dana leaned forward. "So you're saying my client voluntarily gave away $50,000 in lumber without signing anything?" Karen's silence said it all. But the worst blow came when the police officer testified that the HOA had refused to let him inspect the logs after I reported the theft. That suggested intent to conceal. The judge's tone shifted immediately. Less patience, more suspicion. By the end of the second day, the HOA's defense had completely crumbled. Their fake witness statements were exposed. Karen's husband had been out of town the day he claimed to see me cutting trees. Dana presented phone GPS data proving it. The courtroom murmured. Karen's face turned red. The judge ended the day by saying, "There's substantial evidence of trespass, theft, and defamation. We'll reconvene for a verdict tomorrow." As I walked out of the courtroom, Karen glared at me like she wanted to set me on fire. But for the first time, she wasn't smirking. She was scared. Because she finally realized she was about to lose everything. The next morning, the courtroom felt electric. Even people with no connection to the case had shown up to see the outcome. The Pine Hill HOA had always ruled through intimidation, and this trial had turned into a public reckoning. Karen sat stiffly beside her lawyer, arms crossed. Her lips pressed so tight they were colorless. The judge entered, papers in hand. Everyone fell silent. He began by reviewing the evidence: the drone footage, surveyor reports, witness testimonies, and GPS logs. Then he said the words I had been waiting months to hear. "The evidence overwhelmingly supports the plaintiff's claims." Karen's head snapped up. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but it didn't help. The judge continued. "The court finds the HOA and its president, Ms. Karen Lawson, guilty of trespassing, theft of private property, and defamation." The room erupted in murmurs. Karen's jaw dropped. The judge banged his gavel for silence. He ordered the HOA to pay $50,000 in restitution for the stolen logs, plus an additional $25,000 in damages for defamation and legal costs. Karen herself was personally fined for willful misconduct and barred from holding any HOA leadership position for 5 years. When I looked over, she was trembling with rage. "This isn't over," she hissed under her breath as we passed in the hallway. But the truth was, it was. Outside, reporters and locals swarmed me. Many shook my hand, calling me the guy who beat the HOA. I wasn't looking for fame, though. I was just relieved that the truth had finally cut through all the lies. A week later, I drove back to my land. The sun was setting through the trees, painting everything gold. I could finally breathe again. Dana joined me, smiling. "You know, this case might change how HOAs operate around here," she said. "You set a precedent." The restitution money arrived soon after. I used it to rebuild my woodworking business. But this time I installed security cameras everywhere, real ones. Hidden ones, even drones on standby. Karen wasn't going to pull another stunt like that again. Months later, word spread that she'd been voted out of the community entirely. No one wanted her around after what she'd done. As for me, the land was quiet again. The forest grew back stronger. Every time I passed the place where those stolen logs once stood, I smiled, not out of spite, but satisfaction, because I had done the impossible. I stood up to an entire HOA and won, and for once in Pine Hill, justice had roots deeper than greed.